From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. I'm Jason Tenori, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Yo, welcome back. Dental Lighthouse Podcast. Dr. Jason here. And it's January 2nd. It's very early. So if I'm not my boisterous, loud self, it's because I have a house full of kids and their friends sleeping. And even though I'm in my office with the door closed, I worry. So as many of you guys know, I wake up pretty early. This morning was a 4:30 wake up, and then an hour in my morning routine, the good word, some journaling, some box breathing, some meditation. I'm reading a great book from Larry Burkett right now as part of 75 Hard. Then I got my workout in, quick workout today, 45 minutes, more of a stretching and core workout today. Active recovery. And now I'm back in my office, and I wanted to share with you guys some thoughts about a coaching call that I had yesterday. And man, this guy, young kid, everybody's a kid when you're as old as I am, but young kid who is trying to run a great business with his significant other, who's more of an operations type person, but they got a really good thing going, right? So they have 2 doctors, including him, 4 hygienists. So the great ratio of 2-to-1 hygiene to doctor. They're producing a lot of dentistry, but in making them go through an exercise at the end of last year, where I had all my coaching clients go through a cash flow analysis, came to the realization that profitability wasn't nearly what they thought it was. And this rude awakening kind of slaps you across the face, where you come to the realization that, man, I am working way too hard for the amount of money that I'm making. And it's hard in dentistry because a lot of times we can just outproduce problems, right? And this kid is working 5 days a week, and if he wasn't working 5 days a week, they would be losing money, which is a red flag, because the profit margins in dentistry are some to the point where you should not have to be working 5 days a week just to be in the black. And I believe this cash flow analysis helped him come to that realization. So as we started to dig into some of the things that we have for 2025, some of our goals, let's say, we're really trying to put a cap on top line revenue. He doesn't need to produce anymore. He's got a great associate. He's a big time producer, four competent hygienists. So we're not worried about driving revenue. Now, I don't want him to go backwards in revenue, but if they were able to produce as much in 2025 as they did in 2024, then that would be a win for me, even maybe if it's 1 or 2% lower, because my goal for him is ultimately by the middle of the year, get down to 4 days, and then by the end of the year, get down to 3.5. But in doing an autopsy of the year and doing a dissection of the year, and what is really going on that we need to remedy, it always comes back to accountability. And they have a great team. They believe the people on the bus are good core value fits, but the expectations that this couple have in place, the systems that this couple have in place, are not routinely being executed on and not routinely being followed. And admittedly, they both are reluctant to have accountability conversations or uncomfortable conversations, as you guys have heard me say before. And they would rather go back to the chair and do another crown or do another root canal, put another implant in an effort to have that fix the problem, as opposed to developing the courage to have these uncomfortable conversations. So it's my job as a coach to try to paint a picture of why should we be having these conversations versus the other option of, well, I'll just go do another implant, or I'll just go do another crown, or I'll just go do another root canal. And I think they finally started to see the writing on the wall. This doc is, like I said, working 5 days a week. And then on the weekends, he's trying to run the business, work on the business instead of in it. And we're talking about a 65, 70-hour work week, 2 small kids, a significant other who is an amazing individual who helps out in the office. But there's priorities outside of work, developing the relationship, your faith, your physical, mental, and emotional health. And when you dedicate the amount of time that this doc is dedicating towards the business, there's consequences associated with that. You start to get burnt out. You start to decline in your physical, emotional, and mental health. You start to have your relationships, both with your kids, with your significant other, and with your close circle of friends, your community, start to take a back seat. And these are all consequences. And we've talked in nausea about accountability conversations, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details of that. But one of the key tenets of that rubric that I've tried to communicate to my coaching clients and to you guys is when we're talking to a team member about an expectation that's not being met, we have to explain the why. We have to explain why this system is in place and what the consequences of not executing on the system are. And again, by consequences, I don't mean you're going to be suspended or you're going to be fired or you're not going to get your bonus. I mean that, Mary, when you don't do this, the consequence is that, this patient doesn't get the care that they deserve, or you're creating additional work for the person at the front desk, or whatever it is. There's always a consequence when the task is not accomplished. I challenge you to let me know of any task that needs to occur in a dental office to make it run smoothly, that when it's not done, that there's not a consequence. And I would argue that if there truly isn't a consequence, then the task's probably not important. But again, conversation for another day. So in trying to coach up this doc and his significant other about making sure that they are having these accountability conversations, again, based in servant leadership principles, based in empathy, based in curiosity, based in the 8 servant leadership principles of love, encouraging them to have these conversations. What's the consequence of not having these conversations? And in their particular situation, the consequence is additional burnout. It's resentment amongst the couple. It's the significant other developing resentment for the doc because he's always at work physically and mentally. His kids are really too young to develop a level of resentment, but I know many, many of you have adolescent teenagers that when you're not present like you need to be, when you're not at the ball game, when you're not having lunch, when you're not going for walks with your kids, they're subconsciously developing a level of resentment. They have questions about everything that need to be answered. And if you're not going to be the resource for them because you're not around, then I promise you they're going to get their answers from a different resource. I think it was Lencioni that said he envisions his kids' minds as this 5-pound sponge. And once that 5 pounds is full, then there's not a whole lot of other room for things. So who is filling that 5-pound sponge? For me, I want my kids' 5-pound sponge brain to be filled by my wife, myself, and the people that we trust in our village, in our inner circle. So if you're not around to fill that sponge for your kids, who's doing it? And again, this is a consequence. So it's a different consequence when we're, versus we go to the assistant and we say, the room wasn't set up correctly for a root canal. And here are the consequences of that. I mean, that needs to be done. But at a macro level, when I'm trying to convince this couple that they need to go into the storm and they need to develop the courage to have these accountability conversations, if they don't, what is the consequence? Again, increased resentment, decreased health, decreased profitability, detachment of the family. So these are all real consequences that when you put your head in the sand and you just go back to the chair and prep another crown or put another implant in and the hope that that's going to solve the problem, it never solves the problem, at least not long term. So I think in terms of my call with them yesterday, I really think they started to see that light bulb. They really started to see the solution is not to outproduce the problem. The solution is to plug the holes in the bucket. And the number one way that this couple can plug holes in their bucket is to not completely revamp their systems. The systems are already in place. I've given them a lot of the systems. The way to fix the problem is to have accountability conversations. And then finally, my message to them was, again, many of you guys know that I'm a huge proponent of Stoicism and the Stoic philosophy. And this really comes down to this mindset of stimulus gap response. So in every situation, there's a stimulus, there's a gap, and then there's a response. So in this situation, the stimulus is, just to use another example of what they're trying to work on, the hygienist finishes her recall appointment, and instead of the system of, let me fill out the router completely, let me walk my patient to the front desk, and let me do a perfect handoff like they've been trained to do, instead of that, what's happening is the hygienist finishes the recall appointment and says to the patient, we're all set here. You don't owe anything. You can walk yourself out. And the patient walks right by the front desk and out to the parking lot, doesn't have a reappointment, doesn't have an appointment scheduled for hygiene, may have had a treatment need that was never presented, you fill in the blanks. So when that happens, that's the stimulus, realizing that the hygienist did not follow the protocol on the ideal handoff after a recall appointment. That's the stimulus. Now we sit in this gap, and this gap can be a few seconds, it can be a few minutes, but we sit in this gap and we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to respond to that stimulus? What they've been doing is responding in a way of, I don't want to go talk to Mary about how she didn't follow protocol, so I will just go prep another crown, or I'll just go put another implant in, and that will solve the problem. But what I need them to do is sit in that gap and say, okay, when Mary doesn't follow the protocol, the consequence of that is building of resentment amongst the couple who owns the practice, building of burnout amongst the primary doc, a distancing of the relationship between the doc and his kids, continued lack of profitability, which means that now I need to work harder and harder and harder just to maintain status quo. These are all real consequences that can be avoided if we develop the courage to go into the storm and have a simple accountability conversation from a perspective of empathy and curiosity and solve the problem. Again, conversation for another day on how to do those. And you can listen to previous podcasts that I've done that talk in detail about how that conversation needs to happen. I'm not suggesting that we're going to spend time on talking about how that conversation needs to happen. They are struggling to even start the conversation. So that's where it has to obviously start, is motivation to start the conversation. And then we can talk about how to have the conversation. So I feel good about them. I'm going to spend a lot of time with them in 2025. And I know that within the next 3 to 6 months, they are going to see just a ton of fruits of their labor. It will be hard, but by the end of 6 months, I know in my heart and in my gut that he will be working significantly less. They will be more profitable, and the team will be more fulfilled. Why? Well, why is that, Jason? Why would the team be more fulfilled? Because you are now being crystal clear with what's expected of them. And when they are not meeting that expectation for whatever reason, we're having a conversation about why the expectation wasn't met, getting trained up on the expectation, and making sure that the next time the expectation is executed. And that's what we call winning, right? That's what we call a team member leaving at the end of the day, realizing that they won the day because they were able to do all of the things that are needed, all of these expectations that we have of team members in the office. So again, I just wanted to kind of share some thoughts with you about that. And I really feel that when we tie a consequence to any task, to any level of accountability, we can start to convince ourselves, I need to do this, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's painful, even though I don't want to do this, even though I would rather go back to the room and just prep another crown. I need to do this because the consequences of me not doing it are too significant. The risk is too high. And I think that message, I think I got that message through to them, and I hope that it resonates with them, and I hope it resonates with you. So that's it for today. I appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate you guys dealing with my voice being a little lower than normal in an effort to not wake up my kids. Because once the kids get up, all hell breaks loose, and then I will get absolutely nothing done. So thanks, guys. Reach out if you need me for anything. My email and cell phone are on the website, dentallighthouse.com, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tenori, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.